my very favorite source for news in the entire planet. He is a hero of mine, actually. His work, his tireless work, has exposed so many lies, has forced the mainstream media to cover stories that they simply wouldn't have covered. He and other bloggers like him. But again, this is so important that we have alternative sources. We see the numbers falling, we see that people are turning away from the mainstream, or at least turning more to those alternative sources. Sources like the Pacifica Network, sources like bloggers who are telling the truth. We can support these, but it's going to take a really concerted, united effort for us to continue to make a push forward, because we can move this forward. At this point, it's not about the minutiae as much as it is about where we go from here. How do we move this forward? That's what we have to focus on now, and I believe that he is one of the people who is doing that. He has a very popular blog called whatreallyhappened.com. I'm sure that many of you have visited that blog. This is Mr. Michael Rivero. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
And after 17 years of working virtually and being on the end of that very long wire out in the North Pacific Ocean, this has been an incredible treat for myself and my wife Claire to actually come out here and meet our fellow travelers on the path to truth and peace in person, and to actually get to connect and just say, wow, there really are people out there who care as much about the future of this country and the future of the planet as we do. And I want to start off by saying, first of all, that out in the lobby we have for sale absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
But I do want to thank Lenny, Charles, and INN for this incredible opportunity to be here, because how many peace activists get to perform off Broadway? But we're not here for laughs. So I basically want to talk to all of you about, I mean, you don't need me to tell you that the official story of 9/11 is crap. You don't need me to basically repeat what all these other speakers today have said so well and in such detail. Quite the contrary, we need you. We need you to be our evangelicals for truth. We need you to be our grassroots lobbyists. We need you to get out there, as some of the other speakers have said today. You've got to get out there and start talking to people, and you're going to meet some resistance. It's not easy. And the reason is because you are not the 9/11 denialists. The 9/11 denialists are the ones who are clinging desperately to that official story, because the alternative version is just too terrifying for their worldview. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is, instead of going in with the microscope, I'm going to pull out to the macro lens here and talk about 9/11 in the context of world history. Because if you're talking to somebody about what happened on 9/11, sooner or later you're going to get the fallback excuse. You can give them all the science and all the laws and all the video, and they'll step back and say, well, I just don't believe that our government would lie to us like that. And the answer is, of course, yeah, they would. They do. And it's been that way throughout history, and it's all about power. It's about power of the rulers over the rule. I'm going to try and go really fast because I know we want to get out of here and see Richard Gage's film, so I may skip a few of these slides. Please bear with me. Take notes. There's a quiz next period. Power is the ability of the rulers to do things that you, the ruled, are not allowed to do. You've seen the guys in the ropes, thou shalt not steal, and yet government steals all the time. They call it taxation, confiscation, civil forfeiture, and in the extreme, conquest. And then the guy in the funny robe says, thou shalt not kill. And yet government goes out and kills. They call it capital punishment, assassination, termination with extreme prejudice, and in the extreme war. Then we have this other one, thou shalt not bear false witness. And do you really think that the rulers that are willing to break those other two are going to say, we ought to be truthful with those people? Of course not. That's how they control you. They've always controlled you by simply feeding you lies to get you to do what they want. And we're going to show you a few examples here. The biggest and the first lie, rulers speak for the gods, rule by divine right. I talk to the gods, and if you don't do what I say, they will make your spouses ugly, your crops to fail, and important bits of your body dry up and fall off. And by the way, please leave some money in the collection plate on the way out the door, because Zeus there needs a new wardrobe. Now, a while back, one of the Egyptian rulers, Ramses II, or Ramses the Great, by his own admission, decided to prove how butch he was and expand Egypt's territory by invading the kingdom of the Hittites. And so he got his butch army together in their chariots, and they went tearing on up into the land of the Hittites to a place called Kadesh. And lured in by a couple of Hittite spies, he walked into a trap and he almost lost his entire army and was required to sign the Treaty of Kadesh, which is history's first recorded non-aggression pact. I promise I won't come and whoop on your people anymore. Okay? Then Ramses basically went back to Egypt and he started building temples at Karnak and Abydos, sort of his version of CNN, because he covered the walls of these temples with all these carvings about him victorious over the Hittites at Kadesh, and how he forced them to sign a treaty that they would not attack Egypt. And it wasn't until 1908 that the Hittites' version of the treaty was unearthed, and everyone said, I think Ramses was fibbing to the Egyptian people, because he knew they could not go up to Kadesh and find out for themselves what had really been going on. And so if you ever get to tour Egypt, and I recommend it highly, you will see carved on the walls of those temples that rulers will bullshit their people, and they have been doing it for 3,000 years.
Caesar and the Gauls.
Yeah, very much Caesar and the Gauls. I couldn't fit them all in here. I didn't get the stolen incubators and all the rest of that stuff. The donation of Constantine. After Constantine died, the Pope came out with this document that says, Constantine gave us the imperial regalia of Rome, and we will loan it to all future kings, with a ceremony of coronation. And this basically gave the church the license over who would be kings. And this was basically done, it's a fraud, Constantine didn't write it, and it was done to justify the Pope's usurpation of the Merovingians and the turning of the thrones over to the Carolingian kings. And again, it was another fraud, and they just lied to the people and said, Constantine said, we can do this, that makes it cool. The unholy crusades, of course, were started and didn't do too well, and they kept trying to do it over and over and over again. And so in order to get people in Europe to go out and try and slaughter the Saracens, they came up with this guy by the name of Prester John. And Prester John was kind of this Superman. He was supposedly the descendant of one of the three wise men who visited Jesus, and on the far side of the Middle East, he had set up a Christian kingdom. And all he was waiting for was a sign that the armies of the Pope were going to come in from Europe, and he would attack from the other side, and we would be victorious in the Crusades, and it really didn't work out. And of course, this myth lasted like about 400 years, and the guy just couldn't have lived that long. And ultimately, the legends of Prester John became part of the legends of Baron Munchausen, even up to the point of making movies about this stuff, which means a really good story. There might be a movie deal in it, even after we know it's all a lie. We're going to skip that one. Okay, after Columbus discovered the New World, there's some debate about that, he brought back reports of basically mud and very angry Indians and not much else, and it was hard to get explorers to make the trip across the Atlantic to try and conquer and develop the lines for Spain. So the Spanish government resurrected a legend of 7 bishops who vanished during the Moorish invasion in 711 and had fled across the sea to the Americas, even though in 711 the official story was, there's nothing on the other side of the Atlantic, stay home and work in your fields. And created this myth of the 7 cities of gold. You've probably heard of it, they made computer games out of it, and it's a lot of fun. And they had shipwrecked sailors who had seen cities in the distance with the walls were covered with gemstones. It was actually pyrite. Shh, don't tell anybody. And it was the 7 cities of gold, and that's how they got all these Spanish explorers to come on over. And eventually they did conquer the Mayans and the Incas, and they found enough gold to make everybody happy. Then, of course, we have the story of the witches, when Europe went into the Little Ice Age, and it was still under theocratic rule, and everybody thought the church would have the answer for everything. So they go to the church and say, why are we freezing? Why are we hungry? And the church, as clueless about climate as Al Gore is today, it's the witches! Burn them! Burn them! And of course we know today that witches, as described by the Malleus Maleficarum, don't exist. They don't ride broomsticks and interfere with 757s. They don't change into animals. And it was just another huge lie. Oh, here's a good one. Napoleon went down to Egypt. I guess he was sort of getting revenge on Ramses, I'm not really sure. But he goes in there, causes a ruckus, brings home the Rosetta Stone, says, see, we're doing science down there while they kill everybody. Didn't bother to mention the fact that he lost his fleet to Admiral Nelson on the Nile. Little tiny detail he didn't tell the French people. It didn't come out until after Napoleon fell from power and died or was poisoned, depending upon who you believe. The USS Maine, this is what launched the Spanish-American War. USS Maine lying in Havana Harbor goes kaboom. Remember the Maine. The captain says, I think we had an accident on board. Yeah, boiler blew up, and William Randolph Hearst and President McKinley says, you have no idea what you're talking about. It was obviously the Spanish. And as you said, remember the Maine, go off to war, conquer a lot of lands, including actually Hawaii was first taken over during that whole situation. Philippines, Cuba, and eventually an investigation led by Admiral Hyman Rickover, father of the nuclear navy, went back down and said, it was a Cold War explosion after all. Our dad. The Lusitania, this is the one that got us into World War I. Passenger ship sailing off the coast of England. No escort at all. Boy, who would have thought that one? It was torpedoed by a German U-boat, and they said, those innocent passengers, how could the Germans have done that? And this motivated Americans to join World War I, which was great because that's how the U.S. government got out of the crash of 1907. And not too long ago, divers entered the hold of the wreck of the Lusitania, and by golly, there were bombs and bullets down there after all. The Germans had been telling the truth. It was a legitimate target of war. And the government of Great Britain and the United States basically sailed those passengers into the path of a German torpedo because they needed something to just get those pesky peaceniks to shut up while we go to war. Yeah, there's some of the bombs and bullets and stuff. The Reichstag fire, I know it was mentioned earlier today, set it on fire. Ooh, it's the fault of the communists. We don't need to elaborate on that one. Gleiwitz, this one is the prototype for 9/11. Hitler wanted a war. German people didn't want, nobody wants war. It's messy, dirty, ill-paid work, and there's a risk you're going to lose parts of your body. So Hitler sends some of his own agents to Gleiwitz, Germany, which has this huge radio station with the 2 tallest towers in Germany. And they attack the radio station in Gleiwitz. They even take along a Polish prisoner and shoot him dead and leave him there to be found. And the next day, Hitler says, the Poles have attacked us, we must go back and attack them, marches into Poland and takes the world into World War II.